Okay.
I'm over there real quick. Grab a piece of braided jewelry, the flower pot. The flower pot in the dome, hair flowers.
Hi, everybody. This is Pan Asia 2021, a conference on asexuality in Asia. And today is all about redefining romance, navigating relationships, and also looking at love and marriages. So today we have with us the ace couple. And let me give you a short, brief introduction to the ace couple. We have with us Courtney and Royce, who are a married asexual couple of 7.5 years, and who hosts the Ace Couple podcast. Courtney is a Victorian hair artist, historian, and owner of Never Forgotten. Royce is a computer programmer, designer, and an accessibility and UX advocate. With Courtney's lived experience as a disabled woman and Royce's expertise in web accessibility, the two collaboratively offer accessibility consulting services. So that's about Courtney and Royce. So let me just ask you this question, because I've listened to your podcasts, both Kata and I have listened to your podcasts. And my first question that popped into my head is, what was the main motivation for the Ace couple to start the podcast as the Ace couple? So if you could just enlighten us on that, just why? What was the motivation?
Yeah, I can cover that. I, on my own, have done some just advocacy in the asexual community online for quite a while, but our motivation behind doing a podcast as a couple came from just seeing so much online sort of concern from younger aces, especially those who are romantically inclined, who in just forum after forum on Avon, Reddit, just wherever aces get together to talk, we would see time and time again, people would just say they felt like it was hopeless, that they weren't ever going to be able to find a romantic love that wasn't sexual in nature. And we haven't really seen many other fully asexual couples who have been very visible and talking about their experience very openly. So we thought that we could maybe be a voice in that regard and try to fill that gap and let people know that it isn't a hopeless endeavor, and you can still find the kind of love that's meaningful to you.
That is so amazing and like heartwarming to hear, because I have literally genuinely looked for a couple that can, maybe like inspire me, or I can find some sort of advice about how the relationship works when an asexual person is involved, or an individual who lies on the asexual spectrum is involved. So when I came across your podcast, it was just so heartwarming and inspiring in so many ways. So my next question to you would be like, maybe, for people who have not had the chance to listen to your podcast yet, do you mind telling them that how you both met each other, and how your previous relationships have affected this relationship or this marriage?
Yeah, so we met online. We met online before it was easy for asexuals to meet online. The very specific website we met each other on was OkCupid. And today, if you were to set up an OkCupid account, they have some identity descriptors that are on the asexual spectrum, but at the time we were on there, it was very, very limited. You could say, I'm heteroromantic, homoromantic, or not even romantic, sexual, homosexual, heterosexual, or bisexual were pretty much the only options at the time we met, I think. And so we didn't find each other as asexuals. I very, very happenstantially came across Royce, and you had written in your profile, just in the text, I am asexual. And that got me really excited, because I didn't even have that in my profile. So I reached out immediately, and I suppose they say the rest is history, but I think our podcast episode was almost an hour talking about
it was
actually meeting and all of the weird, crazy circumstances that happened.
It was an odd series of events that led.
Absolutely. So we can't tell the whole story here.
Yes, no, I've heard that. But did either of you guys were involved in any other relationships previously? And then how did that affect this? Do you guys mind telling us about that?
I did have relationships prior to meeting Courtney. I was single when I had met Courtney, and had been for a while. I don't know if it was a full year or so, but all those previous relationships were with allosexuals, and they all tended to be fairly short. About a month or two in length. And it took me a while to kind of come to understand that I was asexual. I didn't have the just snap aha moment that a lot of people seem to have. I grew up assuming I was heteronormative. And at some point in time, like late teenage years, early 20s, something just didn't seem to fit. And over a period of several years after that, I slowly just kind of came in to settle into that identity. And so I think for a few years before we met, I had posed that on my profile as a question mark. Like, maybe I'm heteroromantic asexual, I'm not quite sure yet. And eventually the question mark dropped off after trial and error. Is that the right phrase?
Sure, trial and error. And yeah, as you said, all of your relationships were very, very short-lived before me. I had the opposite experience, where I had a couple of fairly long relationships, but they were also with allosexual people. And there are people out there who can make that mixed orientation relationship work. There are plenty of asexual people who have very happy, fulfilling relationships with allos, but it was never quite right for me. So I definitely, by the time I met Royce, I had kind of stopped looking for a relationship, because it was so difficult to date allo people for me, because I had experiences that just didn't quite work. So it's amazing and miraculous that after I gave up, I managed to find another asexual person I clicked with.
That's lovely. So it is my understanding that when both of you did get into a relationship, it was well established that it's going to be an ace relationship, right? So then Yeah, so then what kind of conversations do you think were important to have before ace individuals get into a relationship or a marriage, or maybe, from relationship to a marriage? What kind of conversations do you think that are important to have?
Well, I think I think conversations around expectations and limits and boundaries are important for any relationship, regardless of the orientation. But they become more necessary in an ace relationship, particularly in an ace allo relationship. Like as you're starting the relationship, what is the expectation down the line? I can think there are probably a lot of other parallels, as in even for allosexuals to say, do you eventually want to have children? What do you want your future or to be like? What do you want your day-to-day to be like?
I do think we had a lot of very serious questions very early on where we, as a couple, kind of decided we are very serious about this relationship and we want this to be a long-term positive thing. So we weren't afraid to have the sort of questions that you would ask anytime you're really looking to seriously commit to someone for a long-term, if not lifelong relationship. So we did talk about, how do you feel about kids? I distinctly remember at one point asking Royce, I said, I know we're both asexual, but is it really going to be okay with you if I never want to have sex? Is that something that you are prepared for and okay with? And you were, to my delight. But I think just questions like that, just get them off the bat as soon as you're ready to commit in a relationship, as an ace or an allo relationship or a mixed orientation one. It's just so important to be open and honest. And online dating does kind of help in that sense as well, because you can put a lot out there before you even start the first conversation. So as long as you're willing to do that and you're very honest, you can sort of weed out the things that are definitely going to be serious issues for you long term.
Yeah, actually, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes total sense, having open and honest conversations about these serious topics, or at least, touching upon the topics that are important to you, the factors that matter to you. And, like Royce also mentioned when he was answering, that boundaries and consent and all of these factors play an important role. When I combine that with the kind of culture that I come from, it's the Asian perspective and the Asian culture. I think it can become difficult to have those kind of conversations, because that is not a culture that we have been, most of us have been raised in. Open and honest conversations are not something that were imbibed in us as values. Like, we learned that as we navigate through life. So in my opinion, that is what I have felt, that cultural context also matters when you are navigating through an ace relationship, or when you are like in basically the construction of sexualities or any sort of asexualities. What are your opinions on that? Do you think that culture plays as important of a role in the construction of sexualities and asexualities within the society?
I mean, culture is always going to play a huge role in so many aspects, whether it's, a religious-based culture, whether it's just what is the culture of what you're growing up in, but then there's also the just default sort of cis heteronormative culture that is everywhere. So it is tremendously important. And I mean, Royce and I both grew up in the Midwestern United States, and the US is huge. Cultures are different in different places, but I grew up in a place where we did not have any amount of good sex education in school. And so learning how to have these conversations was not something that I was exposed to at all. So it was something that, in that sense, we very much had to sort of carve out our own path. And I think once you're able to separate yourself from the cis het allo normative culture, you sort of are free to really say, we don't have to have a relationship like we've been surrounded with growing up, like we were told we have to be in. We can make this wholly our own and make it meaningful for us and make sure that it's what we want. And that can be a really beautiful thing once you have the freedom to do that, but it takes a lot of work, and it is more difficult in some places than others, depending on what the culture is.
Yeah. I think Sneha has a question that they want to ask.
Yeah, I have a question. It's actually, Courtney, this is a question for you. In the latest episode of your podcast, you were talking about your profession. So about how you make artwork and jewelry out of human hair, which is historian art form. I found it extremely interesting, and it was exciting for me to hear another profession which is completely different, and it's quite unique in its own way. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Can you, go ahead and explain what
Sure.
it is?
Yeah, well, I was very fascinated in the history of, it sort of started from a death and mourning area where I was a very little girl. I really liked touring cemeteries with my grandmother and seeing how different cemeteries are different and how people memorialize their deceased loved ones throughout history. And at some point or another, I found that there was a very long history of using hair as a mourning token that you could keep of your loved one. But then the more I started learning about hair art and hair work and the history of it, I started learning this was not just for mournings and memorial. This was actually more often than not a romantic gesture, and it was to keep of your living loved one. And, in hindsight now, all these years later, it's like, of course, I just really latched onto the sentiment of that, because it's just this like raw expression of love, to literally and physically give a part of yourself to your loved one. And so I studied it for years before I ever knew how to do it. But once I sort of got the desire to try to figure it out, I ended up being quite good at it. So I both make the hair work. I will do custom work for clients. If they send me the hair of their own loved one, I can make things for them. And I am a historian first and foremost, so I can lecture on the history behind this, how it was different in different periods of time, different cultures who had different takes and spins on it. And so, yeah, I know a lot of people have never heard of this. So I grabbed a couple of visual aids, because some people are just like, what does that look like if you've never seen it before? So one of the techniques is actually making like 3-dimensional flowers, weaving the hair. So
wow,
flowers
that looks lovely. That looks beautiful.
Human hair. So something like that you can display under a glass dome. If the hair is long enough, you can actually weave it and make jewelry with it. So I have this one, full disclosure, was not made by me. This one's actually an antique, about 150 years old, but that is hair.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh my.
You see the different patterns that were used there. And if the hair is too short to weave in that sense, you can actually make something that's more like flat pictures, more like a hair painting, and that's another technique in and of itself. And those are really great for putting in lockets to have a romantic piece of your loved one very literally on your heart.
Somewhere I get the ace vibes around it. Like, I don't know, this, I've always felt like connecting with the, I don't want to call it extraterrestrial or any other word for it, just connecting with the spirit of another person, the beloved person, without any expectations or without any, it's just pure love. And it's something that that is heavy on ace vibes, I feel. That's why I asked the question, and I wanted to really get into the artwork behind this. So so my next question to you would be, you identify as disabled ace, and as a person who canonically identifies as disabled and ace, would you be comfortable in sharing your experience with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. I am disabled. I consider myself a woman of many maladies because I have just too many diagnoses to run through them all. But one of the more increasingly recognizable ones is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Thus the zebra caftan. The zebras are kind of the mascot for the EDS community, but it's a genetic tissue disorder, so it affects just about everything in my body, and the symptoms can they can fluctuate. They can affect a wide variety of things, since connective tissues are everywhere in your body. And so in practice, this means I use a mobility aid. Most often I will use a cane. More recently, I've gotten some forearm crutches that are kind of specifically designed for people who can't put as much pressure on their wrists as the traditional forearm crutches. It's at a slightly different angle, and those have been serving me quite well. And the intersectionality of being a disabled person and an asexual one is very, very complicated, because disabled people have this really big thing right now in activism where some of the loudest, most vocal disabled activists are sort of centering their activism around sexuality. And there is a good reason for this. It didn't just come out of nowhere. It's not just allonormative culture, but you know, disabled folks have this very long history of being desexualized, being infantilized. And I mean, this is a bit of a trigger warning. This is really heavy stuff, but there is, you know, forced sterilization, a history of, you know, targeted eugenics against disabled people. So naturally so, that community is going to be fighting against that history. But the way that manifests in an increasingly more sex positive discourse, it's a bunch of disabled people saying, yes, we have sex just like everybody else. Or it will get even more complicated for asexual disabled people or asexual people in general when they take it way too far in that direction and say, yes, we have sex because we're human. And that just sort of lends itself to the, okay, well, if we don't have sex or if we don't want sex, does that make us less human? No, it absolutely does not. So it does bleed into really acephobic territory, unfortunately. But my experience has been the asexual community is not any friendlier to disabled folks because our orientations, our identities have been so often questioned in a medical context. We've been pathologized, medicalized, flagrantly disregarded in medical context. So in the same way, a lot of the ACE discourse is pushing specifically against that and saying, yes, I'm asexual, but there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing broken about our bodies. There's nothing, wrong with our brains. And so that can be really harmful to the disabled folks who do live at the intersection of both of these identities. And I mean, quite honestly, when I have tried to engage with this difficult intersectional discourse, it hasn't been well met online or in the ACE community. I have had just absolute targeted harassment from people in the ACE community. I have been told that I am a bad activist, that I'm a bad advocate. I am bad ACE rep and I should not talk about asexuality because our community doesn't want the ALLO seeing you talk about this because you're the wrong person to talk about this. And that's been very, very difficult and very, very challenging because I know there are more of us out there and I cannot be the only one who has gotten this. So that makes it very difficult for disabled ACEs to find community and find acceptance. And so that's actually why just a couple days ago, as part of ACE Week, I founded Disabled ACE Day, which we're hoping to make it an annual event every year. And we're going to have just a very clean Wednesday during ACE Week, because ACE Week, there are already more eyes on us than normal. I didn't want to, make a Disabled ACE Day somewhere in January because then nobody would be paying attention. But if we can do it in conjunction with ACE Week, the eyes are on the ACEs and we can say, hey, there is a day to talk about specifically these issues with the disabled ACE community. And I was very astonished to see that we got some really good conversations going on online about these topics, and I didn't receive any harassment at all. And that is a first. I almost, back in June, I was interviewed for an article about medical bias in the ACE community, and the hate and harassment I got coming off of that article almost had me throwing in the towel. And I almost said, I'm just not going to engage with the ACE community anymore because it is not worth it. And it was Pride Month and I was seeing everybody celebrating themselves and all these different orientations and sexualities. And it kind of just felt like, no, but not you. You don't get to celebrate. That's only for us. So it was very, very disheartening. But hopefully we're starting to move the needle a little bit on that, and hopefully we'll start to get better conversations, better engaging, more acceptance for these complicated issues.
That's wonderful to know that you're organizing an international disabled ACE day during the ACE week, and the responses that you've got this year. I'm happy to note that that you've had a really good response, and I hope this continues next year as well. Please, I think it is very important, the work that you do for the disabled ACE community as well. Really hope that it works out and it continues to grow, and you also continue to grow in this activism as well.
Thank you. I hope so too. I really hope we can pick up some good steam with it year to year.
Royce, my next question is to you. Could you share with us about your work, what you do? You had mentioned in your bio that you are into web accessibility. Could you share with us about that?
Sure. So I've been programming for probably a little over 10 years now, and it's changed in focus. I went to school to learn how to program video games, and then never really got into that industry and started making regular software. After a while, I started working more with the pieces of software that people interact with, the eventually becoming mostly like a website programmer. And during that time period, I got to work with a really talented user experience team who also had a usability division. And that kind of opened my eyes to trying to design or make sure that designs worked for everyone. And that's something that, regardless of what you're designing, whether it's a building or a vehicle or a website, you need to take a wide variety of human conditions in mind to make sure that it's approachable for everyone. In my case, I have sort of spearheaded a few accessibility audits or best practices guidelines for a couple of sizable companies. I've also done some contract work or advising. And generally that just means doing a lot of research, learning what conditions are out there that you need to look out for and like how to accommodate them, knowing what the laws in various areas are, and understanding how to make the technology actually work in a way that is accessible for most people. And in most cases, that is just educating the people who are making things. Accessibility is really not taught in a lot of places that teach programming. And so people make little mistakes. And that's the biggest reason why the web as a whole isn't very accessible right now is because people make mistakes without realizing it, because they don't know that the way that they're making something is going to break it for anyone who can't see the words that are on screen, for example.
And getting people to care about it, because
that too. Sometimes once something is already done, people don't want to take the effort to make it, to change it, particularly if they see it as a problem that doesn't affect them personally and only affects a small percentage of the population. And so that can be difficult. There can be some difficult conversations there, but it's very important. And I'm not sure what the laws are worldwide, but at least in the US and definitely some European countries, there are some pretty strict disability laws that are helping push things forward. They're helping put pressure on big companies that aren't going to listen to individuals within their organizations trying to do things to make things a lot better.
well, and even then, sometimes, from our experience, companies still don't really care because they're like, they kind of take that, it's only illegal if they catch us. So there have been times where it's like, okay, if I can't get you to care about disabled people, how about your pocketbooks? If someone finds this, they can sue you. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what you have to do to get able-bodied folks who run companies to care.
You're so right on this. Actually, when you had emailed us about the accessibility of our website as well, that was the first time even I heard. I don't have any experience in website or UX or anything. So when I mentioned this, the alt text that you had mentioned in the mail to our design team, they were also very, what should I do? So I had to literally research and then pass on the information to them so that they can add alt text to the images that were there on the website. So thank you for that, for bringing that up, because it was such an important detail that we completely missed. And I mean, we had an entire panel on disability, neurodivergence, and asexuality. And having said that, to make our website accessible was very important. And we thank you for raising that up and making us notice about that. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you for taking the note and implementing it quickly and taking it seriously, because not everybody does. And so it was great to see that you cared and you took that extra step once you knew there was an issue. But just like Royce said, accessibility is not taught. And unless you yourself have faced accessibility barriers, it's very hard to know what they all are. And I think that's what makes our accessibility consulting so unique, is that yes, I am a disabled woman and I have a lot of experience in physical spaces and having accessibility issues. So I can speak to that. As a historian, I've been to many different conferences. So I've seen the difference between a conference that takes accessibility seriously and one that doesn't. And so I really know what works in that regard in trying to organize events and keeping accessibility in mind. But Royce has the technical prowess that I do not have, because I myself am not a software engineer in the same way. But Royce is one of the only software engineers I've ever met who has, on your own time, researched this heavily to implement it. So I think we can both kind of catch different things depending on what the issue is we're looking at. So
I 100% agree with you there, and more power to you, Royce, for doing such an important work. I remember you talking about in your answer about the laws that US and UK has. And since I have studied a little bit about the disability laws in the Indian context just recently, I can say safely that the laws are quite progressive, but we're still developing far more things in terms of making the environment and these offices and the websites more accessible for people. But it's the law has just recently been introduced, so we don't know how that's going to go. My next question would be to both of you. Either of you can answer. I think since we are talking about legal things, where do you locate the asexuality movement presently in a global context?
in a global context, that's such a big question, because it's not easy to really connect and engage with people in all corners of the globe yet. And in the online community, it's very Anglophone. And I mean, we are very lucky in the sense that we are native English speakers, so we have access to a lot of the English content that's out there. And there is so much content on asexuality that comes out of the UK specifically, and some from America as well. But a lot of people who are like us, who are Anglophone, who maybe only speak English, don't usually tend to go out of their way to try to find and connect with people outside of their own little bubble. And that is something that I try to be very mindful of, because most of my best friends do not live in the US, and most of my best friends are in different time zones. And we're very fortunate in the sense that we do have technology. We have Zoom. We have different ways to connect. We are more connected than ever, and that's only going to increase from here. But when we started the Ace Couple podcast, for instance, we can really only reach English speaking people in and of ourselves, but we would love to get different people involved in the conversation. So we really tried to go out of our way to find the ACE accounts that were speaking other languages and were from different countries, because it is so important to open up the conversation and get a variety of perspectives.
That's fair enough. I think I agree with you with whatever you said. And okay, cool. Just last question again. do you have any closing remarks for the conference that we have organized during the ACE Awareness Week, or any of the closing remarks, any advice that you'd want to impart to our participants related to ACE relationships, ACE identities, anything that both of you want to say to us?
What have we said that hasn't been said? Let's see. I think the biggest thing for me is that we really need to, as an ACE community, really find the most marginalized voices from within our ACE community and really listen to them and raise them up. Because that is not something we've traditionally seen in the ACE community. I've seen it with, disabled ACEs chronically being shut down. If you follow any Black ACEs online, they are just screaming about how there's a huge racism issue in the ACE community. And it doesn't seem like the content that's coming from the US and the UK is getting much better. And I am so thrilled to see that, Asexuality Asia is, you're right there. You are making your own conference. And I love that. And I respect that so much. Because I actually did some, we both did some accessibility volunteering for the international AceCon back in August, and that was definitely something that we wanted to make it more international, bring on more people from a wider variety of places. But at the end of the day, a lot of us were from the US and the UK, and a lot of us didn't know a lot of more international ACEs. So that was the glaring issue right there. It's like, why don't we already have a list of all of these people? Why don't we already know who we need to lend their voice? So I think we just need to get louder and amplify the voices of more people.
Well, it's wonderful that you at least went ahead and tried to make it international, and you did find out that there are a lot of people. There's just not been a lot of talks around that, not a lot of conversations around it. And to be very honest, the orientation has just starting to be addressed in our countries as well. The representations has definitely been there in terms of animes and a couple of movies and whatnot, but not as much as it's been visible in British and American pop culture. But I'm hopeful that we'll get there as well.
We are huge anime fans, so we have loved the representation that we have seen.
Oh yeah, do you guys have any favorites?
Our favorites are probably the ones that are more not necessarily confirmed canon, but as an ACE couple watching it, we see the codedness.
Yeah.
Help me out. What was the one we just watched that was so cute?
It's okay. It's fine. It's okay. I have one more important question for you. And this is for both of you, okay? And you have to promise me that you'll 100% be honest in answering this question, okay? No jokes, nothing. You have to be, this is very important to me, okay? Here we go. Who does the dishes and who switches off the lights at the end of the day? Be honest.
Sometimes you switch off the light when it's the light that's next to your, on your bedside table. Sometimes I have to walk around to turn that one off too.
Rice, turn off the light. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rice does the dishes. Dishes are not something I am good with for a couple of reasons.
Courtney does all the talking to customer service when a company has a problem.
I make phone calls. I get things done.
Well, at least you guys are honest about it. And I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, Courtney and Royce, both of you, for getting up so early and doing this interview with us today. I'm sure for a lot of us, this has been extremely helpful and way too inspiring. I wish both of you all the very, very best for your future as well. And yes, hey, happy ACE awareness to you guys.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Sneha, do you have anything to say?
I just wanted to ask if there are any audience who has some questions to ask to the ACE couple. We can open it up for a few minutes.
Yeah, lay it on us. I'll just relocate my elbows while we wait.
Oh, Mridula is coming in with, you all are inspiring.
Thank you. I mean, that it really means a lot. Like I said at the top of the interview, we really wanted to be a voice for romance and couplehood that we were not seeing, and we were seeing the need. We saw people who wanted that and were hungry for it. And I'm glad that we are starting to reach some people and that we can be that. Although the one little weird, I guess, caveat that we've seen to that is, I guess I saw it a little on my own even before we started the ACE Couple podcast, but the younger ACEs have really taken to having a, shall we say, a wide berth for who they consider to be ACE elders. We have had people call us ACE elders, and it's like, you know, when we are over the age of 50, 55, we will happily and gracefully take that title and that honor, but we're still young ourselves. I mean, I think the first time someone called me an ACE elder online, I was literally 25, and I was like, how old do you think I am? So we're happy to be inspiring and we're happy to be a voice, but I think I'm starting to think there might be a bit of an ageism issue in the ACE community too.
You just addressed the big question that I had in my mind was, is there a ageism in our community to call both of you as elder ACEs? So yeah, it was funny to me as well.
We've seen it on multiple occasions. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I do understand that we've been married 7.5 years, so we are at a different place in our life, romantically speaking, than a lot of ACEs are, especially the younger ones. So we do have different and more experience in that regard, but we are no such thing as elders. There are actual elders in our community that we can find and raise up.
But are they couples? Are they ACE couples?
I haven't found any. Please point them out if anybody has.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Please go ahead.
No. I mean, I've seen some married ACEs who are older who are married to an allosexual person. I have seen that. Not a lot of ACE couples. So
for individuals who are like us and who are looking for an ACE partner, you guys become the role model for us. So that's why it's not more of an elder ACE, it's more of like a role model ACE. So the advice and the experience that you've had, we would like to get to know more about that. And then through that, maybe, we can take after what goes on in our relationship.
absolutely. We're happy to be that voice.
Actually, I think in my family there was an ace couple. I'm not so sure because I didn't get it from them. So I think it's my grand aunt and her best friend. So I don't know. There seems to be that ace. The story is very ace vibing. I don't know. It's just we don't know it from them. They have passed away, so I don't have any evidence to back that up because I
I'm
haven't
sure
heard it
we'll see
myself.
more. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of older ace single people and couples who have just not engaged with the community because the community is pretty young. The community is young, the orientation is not. So I mean, I personally in my own life, I know 2 different aces who are over the age of 55 who would justifiably be considered elders, and they don't engage online with the community because they didn't grow up with the community. So it's not, normal and natural to them. And I very much value them as people, friends, mentors, but they're not in the community. So I think maybe some of us not quite elder aces can maybe do a better job of trying to seek those people out and give them a bit of a platform as well, because I'm sure the knowledge and insight they could give us would be invaluable.
Thank you, Courtney and Royce, for being here and giving us this your time. It's early in the morning, and we're very, very thankful that you could do this with us. So this concludes the chat with the ace couple. Please do check out their links. I have shared them somewhere in the chat. Yes, I have. So please do check them out and hear them on their podcast. They are really good and they are quite entertaining and informative in more than one way. Please do check them out. So our next session is going to be on love again, but it's going to be from the audience perspective. Eros and aces uniting and just discussing about new forms of relationships and anything. It's open to all. You can just jump in, you can just chime in and give your open bare your heart and just talk about what is going on with your heart.